Hello and good morning or afternoon, depending on where on the planet you are. My name is Cindy Lefton, and I am the pro bono director of research for the Daisy Foundation. And I'm an organizational psychologist for a firm called Psychological Associates that specializes in leadership development and team building. And I am also a frontline care provider. I'm an emergency department nurse in my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. And today we're going to talk about extraordinary nurses, and that would be you. In a very short amount of time, you, and under enormous pressure too, you have created new ways of delivering care. And in the absence of family and loved ones, you have filled that void by demonstrating genuine compassion. Your agility and your flexibility have been awesome. And so many of you, after a long shift, go home and you homeschool your children, you take care of parents, you take care of grandparents, you even take care of a neighbor, and then you come back to work and you do it all over again. What you have done and what you are doing is extraordinary. But it's really important for us nurses to restore our emotional energy and recharge our emotional batteries. And we're not going to talk about sleeping well and eating good and exercise. All that's really important, but you learned about that in your first year of nursing school. What we're going to focus on today is what nurses across the country told us they did on the job to recharge their emotional energy. And again, it focuses on the job, so you're not going to hear about horseback riding or going to a beach. All of those are wonderful. Of course, you have to social distance if you horseback ride and you go to the beach. But all those are very relaxing and energizing things. But we really wanted to focus on what do people do in a busy, chaotic work day? What do nurses do to recharge their emotional batteries? How do they restore that emotional energy? So the work that we're going to present is based on some research that I did with Dr. Leslie Kelly, who is in Arizona. And we focused on the impact, or rather the relationship of meaningful recognition. And meaningful recognition is one of the 6 elements of a healthy work environment. And it's defined by the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. It's about acknowledging how what a person did and how it made an impact on you. So it's feedback about their actions and how it impacted you. It has to be relevant to the receiver, so it has to mean something to the person that you're giving the feedback to, and then it has to be equal to the contribution. So it can't be like over the top or just an elbow for doing something really spectacular. And again, that's meaningful recognition, one of the 6 healthy work environment elements. And there's a lot of research about that on the American Association of Critical Care Nurses website. So we looked at the impact of meaningful recognition on compassion, fatigue, compassion satisfaction, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress. And we had over 1,100 nurses from 24 hospitals participate in this study. And then we interviewed 96 nurses at those hospitals across the country. And we focused on, well, what do you do to restore your emotional energy? And that's the information that I'm going to present to you today. So the responses from the nurses really clustered around 4 themes. And the first theme, and hang on because this is really high technology here. The first theme revolved around appreciation. So it's the times that you get thanked that stand out in your mind. But it's not just appreciation. It's like appreciation on steroids, because this is about the hugs and the cards and all the actions that patients and their families do to convey their gratitude. It's their heartfelt gratitude, and it's meaningful recognition that you receive that lives in your head and in your heart for a really long time. Maybe it even defines you as a nurse. Now, with COVID and that we can't have any visitors, you're now getting this meaningful recognition over an iPhone or maybe even an iPad, but it's still there. So it may be that family member who normally has a stoic voice, all of a sudden that voice cracks when they realize that their loved one is not alone because they're there with you. Or maybe it's that mom who lives in Ohio and her son is in Seattle and he's been on a vent for 10 days and she's seeing him on an iPad for the very first time, sitting up in a chair. And all of a sudden, you notice that look of desperation transforming to gratitude because she knows that you're taking care of that person just like it's your own family member. As one of the nurses in our study said, these kinds of things really pump you up. So even though things are very different now, this type of meaningful recognition is still there. The second theme that emerged is seeing patients get better right before my eyes. COVID makes no sense. There's 30-year-olds on ventilators who aren't going to make it. And while every single loss is tragic, there are people that are getting better, and there are people that will make it. So as one of the nurses in our study said, seeing people get better right before my eyes makes me feel like I have a purpose, and this re-energizes your emotional battery. So while seeing people get better right before your eyes has a clinical component, it also encompasses what we call the churn. And that is that nurses go to work, you put your heart and soul into these patients, you bring them from hell and back, and then you go home. And then when you come back, the patient's gone. Did they go to the floor? Did they go to rehab? Did they get discharged? Did they go to the morgue? You don't know. But you do the same thing with a new set of patients. You put your heart and soul into them, you bring them from hell and back, and then you do it all over again the following day. So it's the churn, and how we navigate that churn is really important to restoring our emotional energy and recharging those emotional batteries. The third theme has to do with teamwork and the power of teamwork. It's the camaraderie that we experience. And it's knowing that regardless of what rolls through that door, you've got somebody alongside you, you've got somebody behind you, and if needed, you've got somebody in front of you. And the teamwork, let me find a quote here because I'm a little disorganized because I'm not used to doing this without seeing all of you. What one of the nurses told us about teamwork, and it just resonates so beautifully. She said, you don't always realize because you're just doing your job that it means so much to them. But wrong quote. Hang on. Because this is important. The support of my colleagues, having them step in and help you, makes you feel like you're not alone and you're not fighting this alone. And that really resonates with what we have going on right now, because with the social isolation, the teamwork is even more important. So teamwork is a really powerful way to restore your emotional energy. The last theme is recognizing that I'm affecting you more than I realize. Is about self-awareness, and it's about your self-awareness of your role in creating and sustaining the human connections. And those were important before, but now they're really important because you're it. You're the lifeline to these people and these patients and their families. And that's a huge responsibility. And realizing that you're affecting somebody, a lot of times that occurs in a conversation, an interaction between you and a patient. It used to happen between you and a visitor, maybe at the bedside. But the point is that those interactions are still occurring. Maybe it's coming over a cell phone or an iPad from the family, but you're still making a really big difference. And increasing your self-awareness of the impact that you're making is a huge way to restore your emotional energy. So in regards to the four themes, and again, thank you for, the high tech here. The common ground of all these four themes, and they'll be on the Daisy website, or you can shoot me an email if you want them. But the common thread of all these themes is that they're forms of meaningful recognition. So gratitude, seeing people get better, teamwork, acknowledging that you're making a difference, all that's happening in your environments 24/7. So right now, while you've been on this Facebook Live thing with me, that's been happening wherever you work. So the point is that you don't need to do any additional work. This extraordinary surrounds you. It's already happening. It's happening before COVID, and now it's happening even in a stronger sense. What you do need to do is take a breath, take a moment to soak in all of that extraordinary that is around you, and to recognize the contributions that you're making and that your co-workers are making. And that's some big ways that you can help to restore your emotional energy. Now, extraordinary nurses are pretty darn powerful, but they're not invincible. And that's why it's really important that you take a moment and recharge that battery so that you can restore your emotional energy. And one of the things that's really important in taking care of you is that you need to have adequate PPE, appropriate PPE. Meaningful recognition is very powerful and it does make a difference, but it does not suffice, does not take the place of PPE. Now, you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that in order to get to the next level, you had to meet the needs of the level that you were in. And I believe that PPE is a basic fundamental need of a healthy work environment, and that you have to have that in order to get to the next level. Now, some people may say that PPE is a safety need. Shoot me an email. We can have an offline conversation on why I believe that it's a basic need. But the American Association of Critical Care Nurses also believe that PPE is essential to a healthy work environment, and they're doing a ton of work right now to ensure that nurses have PPE, as is the American Organization of Nurse Leaders and so many nursing organizations. At this moment, our world and our work is really complicated. The donning and the doffing is exhausting. Policies are changing by the minute. It's really hard for patients and families to deal with not being able to be together. And frankly, us nurses, we're scared. But despite these challenges and this horrible virus, extraordinary nursing, it doesn't stop. It gets better. There's tons of stories of nurses using their personal cell phones so that these patients can contact their families for the very first time. There's amazing stories on the internet of people who are taking their picture and they're putting it on the front of their gown so that the patients can see that underneath that mask and those goggles and that gown is a real person who is joyful and has love. And one of the hospitals on Long Island, every time a patient gets discharged, they're playing the song, "Here Comes the Sun," on their overhead pager, so everybody can know that somebody is getting better and somebody's left the hospital. And there's so many other things that are being created right now by you. And we'll learn more about those as people are putting things like that on the internet. But the point is that, again, extraordinary is surrounding you. Take a breath, take a moment to look at all the good that is going on around you and soak it all in, because that's one major way that you're going to be able to recharge and restore that emotional energy. So during your busy, chaotic shifts, and I know they're busy, I'm right there with you, and they're chaotic, absolutely. Aside from taking in the contributions that you're making, because you are, and we know that you are. The Daisy Foundation has gotten tons of stories and calls about all the things that all of you are doing. Nominate one of your coworkers for a Daisy Award for their extraordinary actions. And it's really important because what's happening right now, these are the stories of how we're navigating this pandemic. And that story needs to be heard, and we need to be the ones to be able to tell it. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. But one thing is certain, and that is that nurses, you are the glue that is holding this world together. And you're doing an awesome job. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Wash your hands, be safe, social distance, wear your seatbelt. I know wearing your seatbelt isn't part of COVID, but I'm a trauma nurse, so do that. Take care, keep being extraordinary. Take a moment to recognize yourself. Thank you.